So good evening, everybody. My name is Craig Wilson. I'm the operations manager at Global Adventure Challenges, and I'm joined this evening by Ken Storer, who's one of our UK challenge leaders. And we've been asked to come along and try and give as much insight as we can into the Kenya trek taking place February 2026. So what I just want to do is a very quick introduction as to who Global Adventure Challenges are. And then I'm going to hand you over to Ken, who is going to talk you through the itinerary and some frequently asked questions. And there's a few other little bits from me. And then we'll, of course, open up to the floor for you to ask anything that you like about the challenge. So, who are Global Adventure Challenges? Well, we are a charity challenge operator, and we've been going for over 20 years. We are, to all intents and purposes, a tour operator, similar to TUI or anybody else that operates trips around the world. However, we specialize specifically in the charity challenge sector. Every event that we put on, or every trip that we put on, has always got a fundraising focus or a charity element to it. And that's something that we're incredibly proud of. And because of that, we've been able to work alongside over 1,500 different charities. We've helped raise in excess of £50 million through the provision of our overseas challenges. And we're also fortunate enough to be able to operate in over 36 countries worldwide. So like I say, we aren't a flop and drop holiday provider. We do specialize in the charity challenge sector. But where we are very, very similar is that we're fully bonded through the Civil Aviation Authority. We're an ATOL license holder. So in terms of financial protection and consumer confidence, we hold or have the same credentials as some of those big named tour operators that you might be familiar with. So whilst that might not be the most interesting bit, and you're probably all desperate for Ken to start talking about the itinerary, it is, of course, worthwhile knowing who you are going to travel with, and that you aren't dealing with any cowboys. So I want to hand you over to Ken now, and he can start to take you through the challenge itinerary. Over to you, Ken.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. As Craig said, my name's Ken Storer. If I just give you a little bit of background of myself, because it is pertinent to what we're going to be talking about. I'm a qualified UK mountain leader and a qualified international mountain leader. And I've led charity events and treks to loads of remote locations around the world. Mountains, altitude, above the snow line, in the desert, and in the jungle. In my personal life, I also do a lot of trekking, a lot of multi-day trekking, UK and, again, remote locations around the world. Now, the reason I say that is because I haven't actually done this particular trek in Kenya. I've been to the neighbouring countries, Uganda and Tanzania, but not this particular trek. Myself and Craig have had a detailed briefing with the ground handlers. Now, they're the company based in Kenya that are going to provide the logistical support for this event. And then based on that briefing and both mine and Craig's experience of the charity treks and so forth, we've come to an understanding and a view of what exactly this trek is about and what the issues or particular challenges that this one might raise. And it's no different from whatever line of work you may be in. If you're asked to do something new, something you haven't done before, you know, you very quickly fall back on your experience, you ask some questions, and whilst you might not know some of the finer points of it, you have a sort of a grasp of what it's all about. So that's where we are. I think it's important to put that out there. So if we go on to day one, please, Craig. Day one is going to be, I'll sort of firstly mention this is a 10-day itinerary from leaving the UK to landing back in the UK. So day one will be a flight out to Kenya. The flights haven't been booked yet. It's way too early for that. It is very, very likely to be London Airport and an overnight flight from London to Nairobi. On arrival in Nairobi, we'll be met by the ground handlers, our local team out there, and then we'll take a transfer to Lake Naivasha. Now, Lake Naivasha is about 65, 70 miles sort of northwest of Nairobi. And we anticipate a sort of 2.5 hour, 3 hour drive there. And that's, while it's not a long distance, you've got sort of local roads and traffic that will impact on that. We'll obviously have a stop part way. When we arrive at the campsite, and it might be worth you just sort of try and remember some of the names I'm giving you, or make a note of it, and you can sort of do some Googling yourself afterwards just to give you a little bit more information and a feel for what it's about. We're going to be spending the first night at Fish Eagles Camp. Now, there is some text on these slides. I'm not going to insult you by reading them out to you, so please feel free to read, but I'm going to pick out the pertinent points. So we get to Fish Eagles Camp, which is on the edge of the lake. We'll have some lunch, and then we've got a short transfer out to Crater Lake. And as the name implies, this was caused by volcanic activity, as is all of this area that we're going to be visiting. Crater Lake does have another name. It's a Swahili name, which I won't begin to try and pronounce, and it means green lake. And I don't know whether it's coming up on your screens there. You can see that there's a bit of a green tinge, sort of yellowy tinge to that lake. And that's because of the particular alkaline nature of the lake, and the algae that grows there combines and causes it to sort of turn green. How that affects us is it also attracts certain wildlife, in particular flamingos. But on this walk, next one, Craig, a couple of hours, we will have a chance to see zebra, antelope, etc. Back to the campsite, have dinner, and then a full briefing. So that's quite a short day walking, but we will have been traveling, and it just sort of gets us into mood and a feel for what it's like. So day 3, we're going from the lake to a place called Nabuta Campsite, and this is in Hell's Gate National Park. Again, all of the national park is predominantly formed by volcanic activity. And the next, please, Craig. By volcanic activity, and it's really important for the area, for the local communities, providing food and water for generations and generations. And that slide gives you a bit of an idea of what it's like, and it's a range of valleys, steep-sided gorges, savanna and bush. And I was actually looking at an Ordnance Survey map over the weekend, and it's sort of quite undulated and quite dramatic in places. So we'll walk from the campsite, we'll go through a small town, which will give us a feel for what it's like, sort of what communities are living like. And then we enter the national park, and then we're on our trek. And we're going to be taking a circular route around to our campsite, which is shown on the next slide. So yes, that is a campsite. You are in Africa, in the wilderness of Africa, and that changes from the first campsite we're at, Fish Eagles, which is quite luxurious. That's even got a hotel next to it. You can buy drinks and such like, and plentiful running water, sit-down toilets, Western toilets, as it's generally referred to. Here we haven't got any of those luxuries. We are in the wilderness. There is another slide later on, which I'll point out, which again it shows this particular campsite. All of the campsites we're going to be going to do have a toilet of some description, and this one has what we call a long drop toilet, which is basically a structure with holes in the ground. Okay, so the key point for us there is, because I always like to think when I hear some information, is how does that affect us? What are the issues there? And it's going to be hygiene. It's hygiene, and hygiene. Okay, next slide, please, Craig. So moving on to day 4, which is Hell's Gate Gorge. Now, this entails a steep descent into a gorge, and the gorge is formed by a river, which has since dried up. And it's 18 kilometers, sort of 9 kilometers out, turn around at 9 kilometers back. And when we look at the timings there, that 18 kilometers / 7 hours, we tend to work on 3 kilometers an hour, about 2 miles an hour, sort of a walking pace. And that allows us to stop, take photographs, enjoy the scenery, look at the wildlife. And it's fair to say that this challenge, this isn't an extreme challenge. There are some distances involved. You know, that one of the days is 26 kilometers, nearly 17 miles. So that is a good distance for which you will need to spend some time on your feet beforehand, and we'll come to that. There is a caveat with this particular day, and that depends on what the weather has done before we arrive there, because it can be susceptible to flash flooding. We will know that beforehand. The guides are local. The guides speak to the national park staff. We're looking at weather forecasts, and we will only go into the gorge if we are 100% sure it is going to be safe. Okay, but there is a bit of a caveat to that. If that isn't an option, then we'll go and have some fun somewhere else and explore another part of it. Just flick on to the next one, please, Craig. So here we have another picture of Nabuta campsite. You can just see that shelter on the right-hand side. And what this sort of paints to me is what life is going to be like in the tents. In terms of accommodation, tents are all accommodation, actually, whether it's a hotel or a tent, is allocated on a basis of gender and age, roughly, because there is no real way to do something different, unless you have a preference to share hotel room tent with somebody. So if you're traveling with somebody, or you've made friends with somebody and you want to share that, then that's absolutely fine. All you need to do is to make Global Adventure Challengers aware at the booking phase, and then we'll make sure that happens. But nonetheless, you are in close sort of confinement, as that picture shows. So you're thinking about what sort of baggage you're going to take. How do you manage your bags if there are 2 people in a tent? If there's any rain, what can we do about getting some clothes dry? Can we tie it up onto the trees, a bit of a string, and that type of thing? Next one, please, Craig. So day 5, we're going to Longonot National Park. The following day, we'll go to Mount Longonot, but for the time being, we need to get from where we are and head east through the national park to our next campsite. Whilst we are traveling, particularly this one, because this is a linear route, whereas some of the others we've been out and back, we've entered on that day 3, we've entered the park and done a circular walk round to the campsite. This is a linear route to our campsite. To sort of explain what it'll be like, it can be very a lot of bushes, savanna. The Kenyans have a term of using a dark road, they call it, which we would probably just call a track, which a 4x4 would probably use. This day we are walking partly on a dark track, and then we go off the dark track through the bush. So part of the day we will have sort of close by vehicle support, but then back end of the day there'll be no support and we'll be on our own working through the bush. We are in the wilderness. There are animals around. There are zebra, antelope, giraffe, buffalo, but we will have with us, apart from the local guides who are very knowledgeable, and we'll be scanning ahead constantly. And it's a balance between having the view of the animals, but also being sufficiently far away not to spook them and not to make them think that we're a threat. But we will have armed guards with us, and that is standard procedure in a lot of countries of this nature and doing this type of trek as well. In fact, if a lot of countries, even in North Africa, because of policies of the government, you would have an armed guard with you. So that is nothing to be concerned about. They are there for our protection ultimately. So this is a linear walk through to Longanot, which brings us to day 6, Mount Longanot. So Mount Longanot is an extinct volcano. It last erupted about 1860, and all of the area around there has remnants of the ash that was thrown out and the boulders that were thrown out and the lava flow. So again, what, 16 kilometers / 7 hours, and that's because we are going to go up to the crater rim with a height gain of approximately 630 meters in height gain. So the altitude is 2776. So we're not at the height where altitude plays an issue, but potentially we're going to be sort of gasping a bit. This is particularly sort of steep in places and a bit rocky underfoot. Some of it's quite, but again, we have plenty of time. We get to the crater, and then we're going to be walking around the crater, and that gives you a picture. That's obviously looking down into the crater itself, and that gives you a picture where those people are sitting as to what sort of the rim of the crater would be like. That would be an early start for us, because as well as doing the distance and the height gain, we want to spend the time and the views. So that's going to be amazing, particularly looking from there over to the Rift Valley. And then we're going to drop back down into camp, have some lunch, and then drive out to our next campsite. So we're starting now to make our way back towards direction of Nairobi. This is a photo that our contacts, our ground handlers in Kenya have sent to us. I'm not saying these are the tents we're going to be using at all, but you do get the picture. This is a nice place, and it certainly is. This is sort of back to what it was on day 1 at Fish Eagles Camp. So we've started nice. We've had a little bit of a taste of African experience, and now we're getting back to a little bit of luxury at this particular campsite. So that would be day 6. Moving on to day 7. This is our last day of walking, and we visit our last crater. So 9 kilometers, 3 hours. We go out to the next crater through the bush. Next crate, please. Through the bush again. There's going to be the constant chances of seeing zebra, buffalo, giraffe, antelope on the trails. Visit the crater, back to the campsite, and then we travel back into Nairobi. So day 8, which is in Nairobi. Again, this is going to be a particularly early start for us because we've got a lot to cram in here. Firstly, we're going to go out to the Nairobi National Park and visit the park, enter the park, have a sort of safari, for want of a better term, or the Kenyans tend to call it a game drive. And so we explore what we've got to see there. Following that, we'll leave that particular park, visit an elephant orphanage, which is situated just outside the park. And then from there, have some lunch. And then the next slide, we're going to go to a nearby, it's about 20 minutes or so to a giraffe park, where they look after the Rothschild giraffes. And these are one of the most endangered species of giraffe. And there's a census in 2018, there's about 1,400 giraffes sort of left in the world, which is a shame, really. So it gives opportunity to see that as well, which again, that's going to be amazing. After that, back into Nairobi, and the travel distance from Nairobi out to the park and back again is only about sort of 30-40 minutes, depending on traffic. So they are very short transfers, but we want to spend as much time as we can at these 3 sort of areas there. Back to the hotel, now in a hotel, yeah, and we have our celebration meal at the hotel, and then departing on day 9. It is a free day until we actually depart. Advice is we're probably not going to be visiting Nairobi itself. We're probably going to want to stay within the confines of the hotel, really. until we have our flight back to the UK, which again hasn't been booked, but it's probably going to be an overnight flight landing on day 10. Okay, there we go. So in terms of frequently asked questions, this is just a list that myself and Craig have come up with, which we think you might hopefully answer some of your questions. Obviously, we don't know what experience you've got. You could be first timers to trekking, first time to go to anywhere remote like this, or you might be really experienced, in which case I'm telling you things you already know. At least it'll be a confirmation for you. So these are just some of the highlights, and please at the end speak up. This is your time if you have anything else that you would like to add. Sleeping bags and sleeping mats included. Sleeping bags are not included, but sleeping mats are. The reason for that is we've tried over the years different countries providing sleeping bags, and the quality, let's say, is variable. The cleanliness is variable. So on a purely hygiene basis and knowing people are going to have the right sleeping bag for the right environment, we don't provide sleep, or Global Adventure Challenges don't provide sleeping bags. The ground handler will provide sleeping mats. Is a question for yourself whether you want to take an additional one and put on top to support that. That would be entirely up to yourselves. For me, this is a big one, and one that can cause some issues on any remote travel. A few years ago, you used to go to Spain and you'd have to be concerned about the water. So it's not a new thing, but is the water safe to drink? The water that we will be provided by the guides will be treated in some way, shape or form. It may be boiled, it may go through a filter, or it may be both. But one of my sort of safety things when I'm traveling is you need to be 100% sure about what you're putting in your body, because if you pick up something on day 1, day 2 that causes you to have a stomach upset, it can ruin the whole event for you. And let's face it, you're only going to be coming to Kenya and doing this trek once in your life. So is the water safe to drink? It will be treated. However, my very strong recommendation is that you look to obtain some water purification tablets in any event, is what I do. They cost pennies, they literally do. I looked on Amazon this morning. Obviously you can get from wherever you want, but £5.80 for 200 tablets, and you're probably only going to need maximum 50. So £5.80 for 200, that's 4 people's worth of tablets. And so that's for a very, very small investment. That's really worthwhile doing. In terms of facilities at the campsite, each of the campsites, as you've seen from the photos, vary. Fish Eagles campsite is a very nice campsite, running water, sit down loos. Then we move into the bush. The facilities are really, really basic, and then we're coming back out and then stopping in that last campsite where the facilities improve again. That is part of it, and for me, they are the memories. Actually, you don't remember the nice hotel, you remember the challenges that you've had on a campsite, and the discipline that you've had to do, look after yourself, and that sense of camaraderie that this sort of roughing it, if you like, a little bit feels. Some of the campsites do have showers, and I go back to that second point about, is the water safe to drink? This is a judgment call. If you have a shower, water on your hair, freshen your face up, are you going to put some water in your mouth, which might not be treated and could cause an issue? So again, that's a cautionary activity if they are available. And the way forward is to use wet wipes, body wipes, and that's far, far safer. In terms of food, the food, it will be varied. Breakfast, so I made some notes here particularly about this. Breakfast will consist of porridge, breads, jams, eggs, that type of thing. Sometimes you get sort of omelette, boiled eggs. Lunch tends to be a hot lunch, unless on some days where we haven't got access to a vehicle at lunchtime, then that will be a sandwich that we will probably make ourselves in the day. So you'll have a choose from like a buffet. And then nighttime, there's always soup with bread, and then you can have vegetables, meat, which tends to be beef. And again, at the point of booking onto the trek, if you have got any dietary requests, dietary needs, or just preferences, actually, because I'm not a vegetarian, but I tend to go vegetarian when I'm traveling abroad, is to include that in your application form, and then that will be taken care of. I guarantee that will be taken care of. And the next, please, Craig. Will you see wild animals? Yes. We're going to be seeing antelope, giraffes, buffaloes, zebras, a wide range of birds. That's going to be during our walks, and then let alone going into the national park, as well as the elephants and the Rothschild giraffes. Insects and spiders. I think you're going to guess the answer to this one, which is going to be yes. We are in the bush, and with that, you just really need to be disciplined with how you treat yourself in terms of checking yourself, emptying your boots out if you've left them out overnight. Personally, I don't tend to do that. I'll always have a carrier bag, and I'll stick my boots in the bag. They go in the tent with me. Because you don't want to put your feet in if there is anything there. But if you take them off at lunch or something, just to give your feet a bit of a rest, always check them there. Always make sure the zip is done up. Always carry a good quality insect repellent. I appreciate some of these are obvious things to say, but that is part of the challenge. That's part of the discipline of having a successful challenge through this. In terms of anti-malaria tablets, now this is a definite yes. We are in a malaria country, and your choices are pretty much two. There's one Malarone, which you can take a couple of days before you go, and then that you need to take that sort of 8 days afterwards. The other one is doxycycline, which is an antibiotic. That one is cheaper. You have to be more disciplined because you have to take that for 28 days after leaving the infected area. So if you go along that route, you do need to be disciplined with making sure that you take it when you're back in the UK. There are some generic ones that are available as well, which have brought the cost right down. Now you can get them from your own GP, or you can get them from online pharmacies. But again, in terms of that, different mosquitoes comes out at different times. It's again how you look after yourself. I tend to wear like a walking t-shirt, not a shirt, not a close knit shirt, one with buttons. Crag Opus is the one I tend to go to for, because they tend to be the sort of cheapest. More loose fitting. It's got a collar. It's got long sleeves. So those crucial sunrises, sunsets, when mosquitoes tend to be active, you can make sure you sort of cover yourself up. Again, a good spray will keep the mosquitoes away. How safe is it to do this trek? I've mentioned about the guides that we'll have, which will pick a particular route. You're not going to be going anywhere that's going to be dangerous, but you will have the armed guards with you in just in case an animal gets a little bit too close, that they can sort of scare it off. The vehicles will be roadworthy that we're going to be traveling in, etc. The campsites we're using, we're going to be sort of self-contained in our own area. So in terms of valuables being secure and that type of thing, that's good. These are recognised campsites. Yeah. In terms of visa system has changed now for Kenya. So the visas have gone. It's similar to an ESTA, for those that go to the States, which you have to apply for before you travel. And you can't get it at the airport anymore. You could do with a visa before, but you can't now. And that costs $30. You can get it online. No need to send your passport off or anything. So that makes it really secure in, any concerns about your passport going missing. Okay, Craig. In terms of the weather, I checked the weather today because you're looking at going in February next year. It's very similar. Nighttime temperatures, you're looking at between 10 to 15 degrees at night. It'll get a little bit warmer during the morning as the sun comes up, and then the heat can be in the afternoon. You can expect between sort of 25, 28 degrees heat, and not a lot of cover from the sun. So again, if you're thinking about clothing, a wide-brimmed hat is a must, particularly for people with, like myself, with short hair. If people have got long hair and a baseball cap, that can work. Well, I tend to go with a wide-brimmed hat to keep the sun off. Even though this is their summertime, February is their summertime, there is still the chance of rain. And into the ground handler, and actually somebody the other day in Uganda regarding the weather situation, they're putting it down to global warming. So weathers can be unpredictable, but February is the best time to go. So we're going to hopefully have dry weather, warm temperatures, but with that potential of we could have a bit of rain. So obviously you will need a rain jacket with you. Those two about connectivity, Wi-Fi, 4G, 5G, or phone signal. There is phone signal along the route, and in some areas there will be a 4G signal. Some people use eSIMs these days, which are very popular. And if you've got a 4G and you've got an eSIM, you've got data, so you can send WhatsApp photos back or make calls and that type of thing. So there's several of those around, and obviously I won't recommend any one in particular. They do tend to be destination focused and expire after a period of time. So I've actually just started using something called Roam Less, which is not destination specific, and there's no expiry on it. So if you put £10, £20 on this, it sets up in minutes and it's with you forever. You turn into another country, switch it on, and it works out where you are, and then you're into that sort of using their 4G or 5G. And I appreciate that is important, but one of the beauties of a lot of this is getting away and immersing yourself with your companions, with your fellow trekkers, and just sort of marveling at actually where are we, where are you, what are you doing. What support will there be on the trek? So you will have local guides. They will do the cooking, they will do the putting of the tents up, they will guide you, I keep saying those, apologies for that, they'll guide you through the trek itself. You will only be traveling with a day bag, sort of those basic essentials is what you're going to need. So a waterproof hat, sun cream, insect repellent, your sandwiches if you're on a day where you're carrying your sandwiches, anything else you might want, camera, that type of thing. Everything else will be transported from one campsite to the next by a 4x4. And a lot of the days that you're going to be walking, a dark road 4x4 track is nearby, and if there was to be some form of drama, somebody twists an ankle, feels a bit giddy because of it, or something of that nature, in relatively short time we can get the 4x4 back to you, and they can then look at giving you some support back to the next campsite. You will have with you somebody from Global Adventure Challenges who is first aid trained, and will be carrying a comprehensive first aid kit as well. So sort of well supported there. That last question on how much should I tip the guides, Craig and I were talking about this earlier, and actually it's probably not worded the best. It should be if you wanted to tip the guides, not how much you should. And you're looking in terms of activity days, which you're on about 5 or 6 actual days doing something. The suggestion, and it is just a suggestion, everyone has their own view on this, preferences, own economic situations, etc., is about $10 per day. So sort of $50 to $60 as a ballpark figure, but that is totally sort of voluntary. Yeah. Okay. Right, I think that's back to you then, Craig, on the inclusions.
Thanks very much, Ken. Thank you, everybody. Just before I touch on inclusions, I just want to build a little bit on something that Ken was mentioning there, sort of outside of the itinerary. So Ken was very right in what he said about certain elements of the experience being, I guess, the real value in terms of what you're doing. Now, obviously, we know that the real value in terms of what you're really doing is in the fundraising and supporting an organisation that's close to your heart, but also in terms of your personal growth or things that you will gain from the experience. There are lots and lots of opportunities. So sharing those campsites with other people, being able to share stories and specific moments along the way. It might be that you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Maybe you are someone who's done lots and lots of trekking or walking before, but perhaps you've not done it in a group environment. Perhaps you've always been a leader rather than a group member. Perhaps it's the first time you've ever considered using the toilet in the big great outdoors. Perhaps you've never camped before. There's so many individual I guess battles that some of you will face as part of the challenge, and really there's an incredible amount to be gained. And what I would say is, despite the amazing picture that Ken's painted of the Kenya itinerary, I actually do believe personally, and hopefully Ken will agree with me, that some of the other part of the experience, or something that you gain an awful lot from, is actually the people that you do it with. And so if you do have any concerns or hesitation about whether this is for me or not, because I don't know if I want to be as part of a group, or perhaps I'm not feeling very experienced, or I've not done anything like this before, please don't worry, because actually what makes charity challenges so unique is the environment that's created. And it doesn't matter whether you are a really experienced person or it's the first time that you're doing something. We truly believe that everybody's got something to bring to the table. And it might be that at times you're the person offering a word of encouragement. It might be at times that you're getting a pat on the back or some words of encouragement yourself. But no matter what your age or background, definitely everybody's got something to bring to the table, and certainly that ethos will underpin how that challenge is led by our UK challenge leader on the ground, to foster that sense of togetherness, which is super important to taking part in these kinds of challenges. So hopefully that offers some level of reassurance to you that you aren't just going to be left, muddling along at the back of the group, completely disregarded, and that actually it's about the whole group and not a bunch of individuals. So from a challenge inclusion point of view, you do get quite a lot, really. If you sign up with us, you will get access to an account hub, and the account hub is not really any different to what you would get in terms of online banking or with your electricity provider or anything else. Within that account hub, you'll find all of the information that you need for the challenge. So things like the kit list, the further information documents, there'll also be periodically documents uploaded. So, for example, what to do about your visa, what accommodation we're going to be staying in, your exact flight details. We'll email you to let you know that that's available via your account hub, and you can log in and download it. As well as that, we won't just palm you off and say that all the information you need is in the account hub. We do have a dedicated customer care team, and we're always on hand to answer any questions you've got, whether that's over the phone or by dropping us an email, or via your account hub. There's also a user request function where you can ask a question or request something that you might need to as part of the challenge. So you're very well supported, not only from Ellie's side with the fundraising and that side of things, but in terms of the delivery of the challenge, we are able to support you too. Your flights, return flights from London to Nairobi are included. All of your accommodation, so that includes your hotel in Nairobi, your camping on trek, that's all included. All of your meals from lunch on day 2, so lunch of our arrival day, to breakfast on day 9, so breakfast of our departure day, are included. All of your transfers, all of your national park fees. The safari tour on day 8 is included. Any support vehicles and the local English speaking guides, they're all included. You'll also have, as Ken mentioned, a Global Adventure Challenges Trek leader from the UK. So that could be Ken, or it could be another of our fantastic leaders. They will travel with you from the UK, and their job is to ensure that your challenge is seamless from start to finish. So they will liaise between the ground handler in country that's operating the trip and with yourself. So they'll make sure that everything is happening and that you're briefed accordingly. You know what time things are happening, where you should be. But also, as well as being really, really great representatives and working a little bit like a tour leader, as you would have got from Ken's introduction, our challenge leaders are incredibly competent as mountain leaders, as first aiders. So they've got an awful lot more to bring to the table in terms of making sure that all of your welfare needs are catered for during the challenge. As well as that, as we've said, the leader will carry a comprehensive first aid kit, and you'll also get a challenge medal at the end of the challenge. The only things that aren't included are your personal trekking kit. So things like boots, poles, any waterproofs that you may require. If you wanted to bring a sleeping mat, that wouldn't be included. You will need to have personal travel insurance as part of the challenge. Any alcoholic drinks or drinks during meals, they aren't included. Any tips or gratuities that you need to or wish to give during the challenge, they aren't included. And in addition to that, any meals not detailed in the what's included section previously, which by my reckoning really only leaves you with any meals that you want to get in terms of your outward journey. So you might want to get something at the airport along the way, and equally subject to flight time, you probably want to get lunch in Nairobi or at the hotel in Nairobi before you return on day 9. So pretty much it's fair to say that everything really is covered, apart from those few things. Last couple of little bits from me before I hand back to Ellie and we do some questions and answers. There are two things really that I find put people off or deter people from signing up to a challenge of this kind of nature. One of those is the fundraising element, because that can be quite daunting, but hopefully Ellie's given you lots and lots of ideas around that, and will of course be on hand to support. The other is the amount of time and commitment that's involved in training and preparing for an event. So what I want to do is just take a moment just to explain to you a few things which might help put that to the back of your mind a little in terms of whether or not you should sign up. So firstly, all of our challenge itineraries are designed with the participant in mind. So in terms of making sure that they are challenging, but yet still achievable. So we would say that for a challenge like this, it should be achievable by almost anybody, as long as you have done some training beforehand to prepare yourself for it. That being said, that training doesn't mean you need to get to a super athlete level, but you do need to make sure that you've got a good level of cardiovascular fitness and that you can hit a couple of benchmarks. And the way that I measure these or set these benchmarks is based around what it is I'm looking to achieve in the itinerary. So what you don't need to do before you go on the challenge is to have done 5 days walking, covering exactly the same distance that you're going to do during the trek, making sure that you've covered all of the ascent and descent. That isn't necessary. But from a minimum benchmark point of view, what you do need to do is make sure that you are comfortable walking the maximum distance that you're going to cover on any given day. So for example, in this itinerary, the maximum distance on one day is 26 kilometers. So before the challenge, can you cover that kind of distance with a similar level of up and down that's involved? So that's benchmark 1. Benchmark 2 is, can I get up the following day and walk any distance at all? Because you need to be able to walk multi-day. Now, if that distance is 5 kilometers, 6 kilometers, or 10 kilometers, that's a real great starting point. And I would say that really, as a minimum, that is what you are looking to achieve. And that anywhere you can get yourself beyond that, in terms of perhaps being able to walk 2 days that are in excess of 20 kilometers, that is going to stand you in an even better stead for the challenge. So the more that you prepare, the more you will enjoy the challenge, the more you'll be able to get your head up and look around You'll be able to talk to people whilst you're walking along the route without gasping for breath. You'll have a much more enjoyable time. But like I said, that doesn't mean that you need to go out and cover all of those distances. Now, to achieve that level of training, unfortunately, there is no escaping the fact that in the lead up to the challenge, you are going to need to get out and get walking. But actually, if we're smart about it, we don't need to commit too much time to doing it. So we can already embed some of that into our existing lifestyle. So if we already play sport, we might run, we might cycle to work, we might swim, we might go to the gym, we might do any of those things. They're all fantastic and we should carry on doing them. In terms of walking, we can probably find some opportunity to do that within our day-to-day life. So for example, it might be that we use the elevator or the lift when we're in the office, and actually walking 2 or 3 flights of stairs a few times a day is a massive contribution to our training. It could be that we can get off the bus a few stops early and walk the rest of the way into work. It could be that we elongate our dog walks, or we start walking the kids to school, or there's lots and lots of things that we can do which only need a smaller amount of time to be able to train. We could join a local walking club, and as we get close to the challenge, obviously, we're going to need to increase the intensity of it. But what I guess what I am saying is that try not to be too overwhelmed by the thought that I'm going to be walking 120 kilometers over 5 days. Really, it's those smaller benchmarks which we're trying to achieve, which based on wherever you are at. So if you can already walk 10 or 15 kilometers, there isn't necessarily a huge amount to be able to go to reach the point that you need to. I guess what I'm saying is nobody really in reality is all that far away from being able to achieve something with a little bit of commitment. So that's it on training. A little bit just on the cost now. I suspect Ali may have covered a little bit of this already. But if you wish to sign up, there are a few options to do so. Option A, which is our minimum sponsorship option, you pay a registration fee of £299, and then you agree to raise a minimum sponsorship of £5,100. You need to have raised 80% of that minimum sponsorship amount by 12 weeks before departure, at which point, if you've achieved that, the charity will then pay for your place from your fundraising. The other option is to go down the self-funding route. The registration fee remains the same. It's £299, non-refundable registration fee, but your challenge balance is £3,152, and that is payable by you individually, and that is payable at 12 weeks before departure. And the last option is a bit of a hybrid option. It's partial self-funding with minimum sponsorship. So you pay a registration fee of £299. You pay a challenge balance of £1,652, and you agree to raise a minimum sponsorship of £3,600. So if you are looking to raise 80% by 12 weeks before, somewhere in the region of £2,900 thereabouts, to make sure is in your Just Giving account or similar 12 weeks before departure. So that's it from me in terms of cost. Hopefully you found that presentation useful and it's given you some insight into the challenge. Hopefully we haven't put you off. Like we said, it's a challenge that is suitable for everyone and is definitely achievable with a little bit of training. So I guess now we can hand back to Ellie really and open up to any questions. Either well, they're going to have to come via Ellie, to be honest, because you haven't got chat, have you? You won't be able to do that from your chairs in that room. So, Ellie?
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about the battery life on my laptop. So I think if we go into questions about the track and then I'll run through some fundraising bits afterwards, if that's okay, so we don't lose you. Yeah, so if anyone's got any questions that they'd like to ask about the tracks, Craig and Ken, while we've got them.
I'd like to know why it's called Hell's Gate.
Do you know why it's called Hell's Gate?
I don't know where it's come from. No, there will be a Swahili name. There will be a Swahili name for it. Which Hell's Gate was given as a national park. I think 1975, something of that nature. And it is to do with the river that ran through it, that's as well as all the volcanic activity that's caused this sort of shape of it. But no, I don't know why. Don't read anything untoward in the name.
26-mile walk. How many up and downs are there? I think it was given 11.
Good question.
Yeah.
I can't
Okay. So
say that.
On the 26-mile.
It's 26
kilometres. What's the elevation?
kilometres. Yeah. 26 kilometres. Not. I think I misheard you. I thought you said 26 miles. It's 26 kilometres, and that day it is. I'll describe it as undulating rather than steep up and steep down. There is one of the days we've dropped down to the gorge, which is a short steep drop down, and then obviously we've got to go back up after that. And the ascent of the volcano, excuse me, you could see the slope from that picture. And again, if you get your iPad out or whatever tablet you use and have a look at and Google Mount Longonot, and you'll get some different views of it to give you an idea what that's like. But that's definitely achievable. And going back to sort of my experience of trekking different places and talking to the ground handlers about that day in particular, that 26 kilometres day, there's nothing there that's raising or flagging up with me that no, this is serious, there's an issue here. So it's most definitely achievable. I think more undulating than sort of steep ups and downs.
To give some other perspective as well, to build on what Ken said, obviously those days are, largely much flatter, but not entirely flat. If we take day 6, for example, the Mount Longonot day, that is a day where we know we are going out and we're going up and we're coming down, and we're talking about 630 meters of ascent and descent. So from a perspective point of view, I'm sure a lot of you are based more southerly, but in the north.
I didn't do anything. Sorry, Craig. It's just disconnected us from our main screen. But
okay, shall I carry on anyway?
Yeah, go for it. I'll try and get it working again.
Cool. If you were doing an equivalent UK mountain, so probably something like Pen y Fan wouldn't be a million miles away in terms of starting from the car park and heading up, or you would probably say 3/4 of doing Snowdon from Penny Pass. You're probably doing a bit more climbing. So hopefully, with a little bit of, like Ken said, going on the internet and looking at that, you might get some perspective for the difficulty of what's involved.
I had a couple of rather boring questions, but you mentioned malarial tablets. Are there any other jabs that you think we're going to need? Any vaccinations to go to Kenya?
We don't specifically advise anything, and the reason for that is that we're not medical professionals by any stretch of the imagination. So what we would recommend that you do is, obviously we've said that anti-malarials are going to be a given, but in our material, when you've signed up, you'll see that we recommend that you go and visit a travel clinic, so with your GP or with a pharmacy, so Boots Pharmacy or some local pharmacies will do it. Explain where you're traveling. They'll be able to then give you full guidance on what vaccinations are recommended or are essential, required, that kind of thing. And also as well, you'll need to be able to check that your standard boosters are still up to date and current as well. So you're certainly better off going down that road.
In terms of when we got the vaccinations for India as well, it was super easy. I just filled in a form with my GP surgery, and then they basically went in, had an appointment, and they gave me the vaccinations that they thought I needed. So yeah, it's generally quite straightforward to have. Yeah.
The other one's a bit. You mentioned about tipping and just in dollars. So if you were to take current, what kind of currency would you recommend taking? Would you get local currency or dollars if you wanted to take cash with you?
Do you know the answers to that one, Ken? I don't think I know it off the top of my head.
No, the screen froze a bit there. So So basically, two currencies are in use in Kenya, and that's the Kenyan shilling, which isn't a closed currency. So you can get the currency here in the UK, and then if you don't spend it, you can change it back, or they will accept UK dollars. When I go to somewhere like this, I will take a combination of the two. And the reason for that is I'm going to have some US dollars anyway from previous travels, but then I will take some local currency. And if you look at what the itinerary is about, sort of from landing in Nairobi on day 2, you whisk straight out. Yeah, we will stop on the way for a loose stop, and there might be opportunity to, you know, to buy a soft drink or something. That first night, we are near a hotel, so you might be able to want to buy a soft drink or something else. But there's nothing else around until we then actually go back into Nairobi. So you're not going to need a great deal of money. Hotels accept credit cards. So if you're a little bit savvy on what credit card you've got, as whether you're going to get charged or not. My credit card company doesn't charge me for using abroad. So that is a bit of a backup. But I would suggest, you know, I can't imagine more than £100 in Kenyan shilling. Wouldn't be any more necessary to that. You know, those occasions where there would be a preference for Kenyan shilling rather than the US dollar would be my thoughts. Does that make sense to you, Craig?
Yeah, no, spot on. Yeah, spot on.
Any other questions?
Can you say a bit more about what sort of wild things any time of year?
Any more information on what sort of wildlife you might see at that time of year?
Okay, so yeah, so zebra, different types of antelope, giraffes, wild buffaloes, other deers. They're in the Nairobi National Park. There are lions and leopards as well. Can't guarantee seeing them because they tend to be a little bit more elusive, but they are there as well. So there is that potential. And obviously the elephants and the giraffes, because we're going to an elephant and a giraffe park as well.
Any other questions?
Can I go back to the currency bit?
Yeah, of course.
Just thinking, if you was talking about tipping guides, if we do want to tip them, how many guides are there? Just so that you've got that in your head.
Yeah, it's not done by guide, it's just done per person. So, you know, the number of guides will be proportionate to the number of people taking part. So the 10 or what do we say, $10 per person per day. What tends to happen is that the money is collected in by a representative of the group. And then on the last morning, before we then leave our guides and probably head back to Nairobi, we'll then do a ceremony where we will then, or you will as the group, present the tip to the guiding team, to the head guide, and then they will take that tip away and they will then divvy it up proportionately based on their local customs. So that could be based on percentage, based on the level that they're at. Or it could just be an even split, depending on how they do it locally. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit for you.
Also, don't worry if you do leave this room and suddenly think, oh, I didn't have that, because we can email these guys on your behalf as well at any point, or you can ask us anything. We'll always do our best to answer anything for you, so it's not like this is your only chance to ask anything. No one else has any questions about the trek at this point. I'll let Craig and Ken go.
Thanks very much. And honestly, everybody, if there's any questions at all, please feel free to ask. We'll be more than happy to help. Or if you're having any difficulty signing up or anything like that, please do get in touch.
Amazing. Thank you both for your time. We really appreciate it. Speak soon.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.